Hey everyone, and welcome to the deep dive. So today we're going to do a deep dive on something that language learners all over the world are using to boost fluency, and that is the shadowing method.
Yeah, it's a pretty popular technique.
Yeah, and we've got a really in-depth report on it. And it's not just for English either.
Right.
People are using this for all sorts of languages.
Like a universal language learning tool.
That's pretty cool. I'm already intrigued, but before we get too far, let's back up a bit. What is the shadowing method? What exactly does it involve?
Well, you know how when you learn a new dance, you don't just read the steps on a piece of paper.
Right.
You watch a dancer do it and you try to mirror their moves.
Oh, yeah.
Shadowing is similar, but instead of dancing, you're using your voice.
Okay, I like that that makes it a little less intimidating.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing it involves listening to native English speakers?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You listen to some native English audio and then you repeat it simultaneously, almost as if you are their shadow.
Okay, so like their vocal shadow?
Yeah.
Okay. But I mean, that sounds kind of like just listening to a podcast, right? What makes shadowing different and so effective?
Well, it's definitely not passive listening. It's active listening. It's like active listening on steroids because your brain is really working hard. It's processing everything in real time. You're forced to think about pronunciation and rhythm and intonation all at once.
Oh, okay, so it's like a full body workout, but for your language skills.
That's a great way to put it.
I like it. All right, so walk me through it. How does someone actually do the shadowing method?
Well, first, you've got to choose your audio.
Okay.
And this could be anything. It could be a podcast. It could be an audiobook. It could be a news broadcast, even a TED Talk. The key is to pick something that's just a little bit above your current level.
Okay, so you don't want to make it too easy, but you don't want to make it so hard that you can't understand anything.
Exactly.
Find that sweet spot.
Find that sweet spot.
Yeah.
And then you're going to listen actively to a short segment of that audio, maybe just a sentence or two, and really focus on everything. You know, the sounds, the way the speaker's linking the words together, their intonation, everything. And then you repeat.
Okay, so I try to mimic them as closely as possible.
Exactly. And it's not just about getting the words right, but also their pronunciation, the rhythm, the intonation, all those little nuances that native speakers have.
Right.
And, this is really where the magic happens, because by mimicking those sounds, you're training your mouth to make sounds that might not exist in your native language.
Ooh, like those sounds that always trip me up.
Exactly, like the th.
The thus.
Yes.
Every time.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like muscle memory, but for my mouth.
Yeah, and there's actually a term for it. It's called audio motor mapping.
Wow, that sounds very scientific.
Yeah, it's creating that connection between the sounds that you're hearing and the movements your mouth needs to make.
So it's like building that connection in your brain.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really cool. And I bet that's a big part of why shadowing is so good for improving pronunciation.
Absolutely. But the benefits go way beyond pronunciation. Shadowing is also incredible for improving your listening comprehension.
Really? Okay. I definitely need help with that. I sometimes struggle to keep up with fast speakers, especially when they have different accents.
Well, shadowing can actually help you with that too.
Okay.
Because by actively listening and repeating, you're training your ear to pick up on those nuances and to understand rapid speech better and to just become more comfortable with different accents.
So it's like cross-training, but for your ears.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's not just your ears and mouth that benefit from this shadowing. Can also help you internalize grammar and vocabulary in a much deeper way than traditional methods.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Well, when you're shadowing, you're not just learning, words in isolation or grammar rules.
Right.
You're learning them in context and in natural flowing speech.
Okay.
So think of it as learning vocabulary in action.
Yeah.
You start to understand how words are used naturally.
So it's like you're learning the grammar without even realizing it.
It's exactly.
Okay, I'm sold. I am definitely going to try this. But can we get into some more specific examples? I want to know how I can actually use this in my daily life.
Okay, well, let's imagine you're shadowing a news broadcast.
Okay, like one of those BBC World News podcasts I listen to sometimes.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So not only are you working on your pronunciation and comprehension, but you're also, staying informed, picking up current events, learning vocabulary related to all sorts of world events.
So it's like learning English and getting smarter at the same time.
Exactly.
I like it. Okay, what other types of audio would you recommend?
Well, TED Talks are fantastic for shadowing.
Yeah.
They have speakers with all sorts of different accents,
Right.
which is really good practice. And plus, you're learning about all sorts of fascinating topics along the way.
Yeah, so you're learning about things that interest you while also improving your English.
Exactly.
I love it. But I have to admit, I'm a little nervous about making mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
What are some common mistakes that I should try to avoid?
Well, one of the biggest ones is focusing too much on individual words
Okay.
and neglecting the rhythm and intonation of the sentence.
I see. So it's kind of like learning a musical instrument.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You wouldn't just play the notes. You'd want to play them with, the right expression and the right rhythm.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. What else?
Another common mistake is choosing material that's way too difficult.
Oh, yeah.
You want to challenge yourself, but you don't want to overwhelm yourself.
Right. I think I do that. I tend to choose things that are too hard and then I get frustrated.
Yeah. So remember, find that sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
Something that's challenging,
Yeah.
but not impossible.
Okay, good advice. And what about just staying motivated?
Well, practice is key.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to become fluent overnight.
Right.
Like any new skill shadowing takes time and dedication.
So don't give up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm feeling pretty inspired, but I do have one more question before we move on.
Yeah.
I've heard that there are different, variations of shadowing, like speed shadowing and backward shadowing. Is that a thing?
Yeah. So once you get comfortable with the basic technique, you can definitely start to experiment with some of these variations to really challenge yourself.
Oh, that sounds intriguing. Okay, but we are going to have to save that conversation for part 2 of our deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm ready to hear more about these advanced shadowing techniques you mentioned, but first you hinted that there's some really interesting science behind why this works so well. Can we nerd out about that for a minute?
Yeah, definitely. So shadowing actually taps into a number of different cognitive processes
Yeah.
that make it so much more effective than just passive listening.
Okay.
One of those processes is called audio-motor mapping.
Ah, yes, you mentioned that before. It's like the connection between my brain and my mouth, right?
Exactly. It's the link between the sounds that you hear and then the movements that your mouth needs to make to produce those sounds.
Okay.
And every time you shadow, you're strengthening those neural pathways, and that leads to smoother and more natural pronunciation.
It's like building muscle memory, but for my mouth. Okay, that makes sense. What other brain magic is going on here?
Well, shadowing also harnesses the power of something called implicit learning.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so it basically means that you're absorbing the language patterns unconsciously without having to actively analyze the grammar rules.
So it's like I'm learning by osmosis?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Like your brain is picking up on these patterns in the background, making connections, figuring things out, all while you're focused on mimicking the speaker.
That's amazing. That's why people call it a hack.
Yeah.
It's like you're sneaking those language skills in the back door.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, speaking of hacks, can we get back to those advanced techniques? I'm really curious to know how to level up my shadowing game.
Okay, so let's start with speed shadowing.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned this
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, and as the name suggests, it involves gradually increasing the speed of the audio that you're shadowing.
Okay, I'm already getting stressed out just thinking about that.
It can be a challenge,
Yeah.
but it's a really great way to train your brain to process information faster.
Oh.
And it improves your ability to you react in real time, which is essential for having smooth conversations.
Right.
And it also helps you become aware of how sounds change at higher speeds.
So it's like taking my listening comprehension to the gym.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, I'm up for the challenge. What other techniques can I use to improve my comprehension?
Well, there's also something called shadowing with a delay.
Okay.
And instead of repeating immediately after the speaker, you actually pause for a second or two before you start shadowing.
Okay, now why would I want to do that?
Well, because it forces you to hold that information in your short-term memory and then reproduce it accurately.
Oh, I see.
So it's a really good way to strengthen your working memory,
Yeah.
which is essential for processing and understanding longer sentences.
So it's like adding weights to my brain's workout.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I'm willing to give it a try. What about pronunciation? Are there any advanced techniques that can help me fine-tune those tricky sounds?
Backward shadowing can actually be really helpful for this.
Wait, what? Backwards? What do you mean by that?
So you actually start at the end of the sentence and you work your way back to the beginning.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. I've never heard of that before.
It sounds a little strange, but it forces you to pay really close attention to each individual sound
Right.
and how they connect to form words.
It's like breaking the language down into its building blocks and then putting it back together again.
Exactly.
Okay, I like that. Are there any other variations that we should know about?
Yeah, you can also try shadowing with transcripts.
Okay.
So this involves having the transcript of the audio in front of you as you shadow. And this can be really helpful for beginners or when you're working with particularly challenging material.
I see. I could see how that would be good for building up my confidence.
Yeah, exactly.
But isn't there a risk that I might just end up relying on the transcript too much and not actually training my listening skills?
Yeah, that's a good point. The key is to use the transcript as a support, not a crutch.
Cool.
So try to listen first and then only glance at the transcript if you get stuck.
Got it. Like training wheels for my ears.
Exactly.
Okay, so any other tips for making the most of these advanced techniques?
I would just say, remember, these techniques are meant to challenge you and keep things interesting. So don't be afraid to experiment, mix and match.
Yeah.
See what works best for you.
Right.
The key is to stay engaged and have fun with the process.
I love all these tips. I'm feeling so much more confident and excited about taking my shadowing to the next level.
Great.
But before we get too carried away with all these advanced techniques, I think we should maybe shift gears a bit and talk about some of the practical challenges that people often face when they're trying to actually implement shadowing into their routine. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've talked about the basics of shadowing, some more advanced techniques, and even gotten a little bit into the science behind it all. But, even when you know what to do, sometimes it's hard to actually do it.
Yeah, life gets in the way.
Exactly. So what are some of the challenges that people face when they try to make shadowing a regular part of their lives?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is finding the time.
Yeah.
We're all so busy these days, work, family, social life, and then trying to squeeze in language practice on top of all of that. It feel really overwhelming.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah.
So what do you recommend? How do you make time for it?
I think the key is to try to integrate shadowing into your existing routine.
Okay, I like that.
So instead of treating it as this separate task, try to make it part of things that you're already doing.
Okay, so like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, well, think about your commute. A lot of people are just scrolling through their phones on the bus or on the train.
Right.
But that could be a great opportunity for shadowing.
Mm-hmm.
You could listen to podcasts or audio podcasts and practice on the go.
Yeah, that's a good idea. My commute just got a whole lot more productive.
What about when you're working out?
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people listen to music while they're exercising. Why not swap out a few of those songs for some English audio and shadow along?
I like it. So it's like multitasking,
Yeah.
getting in shape physically and mentally.
Exactly.
But what about those days when I'm just not feeling it? And the motivation is just not there.
Yeah, I think we all have those days.
Right.
But, there are some things that you can do to try to make shadowing a little bit more fun and engaging.
Okay, tell me everything.
I think, first of all, it's really important to choose materials that you're genuinely interested in.
Okay.
So, maybe it's a podcast on a topic that you're passionate about, or an audiobook of your favorite novel, or even a stand-up comedy routine that makes you laugh.
Right. It's got to be something that you actually want to listen to.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to, mix it up. Try different types of audio varieties, key.
Yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah.
Speaking of variety, one thing that I've been struggling with is actually finding good shadowing materials. There's just so much out there.
Yeah, no, it can be a little overwhelming.
So any tips on how to narrow it down?
I would say start by considering your learning goals.
Okay.
So what are you trying to improve? If it's pronunciation, then look for audio with clear, well-enunciated speech.
Right.
If it's listening comprehension, then look for materials that have, a variety of different accents and speaking styles.
Okay, that makes sense. What about difficulty level? How do I know if something's too easy or too hard?
I think a good rule of thumb is to aim for material that you understand maybe 80% of without too much effort.
Okay.
You want to be challenged, but you don't want to be completely lost.
Yeah, you're right. I tend to go for the hardest stuff, and then I just end up getting frustrated.
Yeah, it's like trying to run a marathon before you can walk.
Mm-hmm.
You need to build up gradually.
Okay, good analogy. What about mistakes?
Oh, yeah. It's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
It's actually really important to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
That's how we learn.
Right.
So don't be afraid to pause, rewind, repeat until you feel comfortable.
I'm kind of a perfectionist, so I get really caught up in trying to do everything perfectly.
I think we all do.
But you're right. Mistakes are just part of the process.
Yeah. And, think of it this way. Every time you make a mistake, you're identifying an area where you can improve.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
So instead of seeing them as failures, I should see them as opportunities to learn.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, fluency is a journey, not a destination. So there will be ups and downs.
Yeah.
There will be moments when you feel frustrated and moments when you feel like you're making a lot of progress.
Right.
The key is to just enjoy the ride.
Okay, well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to know about the shadowing method,
Yeah, thanks.
from the basics to the science, and even some tips for staying motivated and finding good materials.
I hope it's been helpful for everyone.
Me too. And I hope everyone listening feels inspired to give this technique a try.
Yeah, it's a really powerful tool.
It is. So remember, fluency is within your reach. You just have to embrace the process, experiment with different techniques, and most importantly, have fun along the way. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.